Hello, today I want to talk about why I think jackpot items are all terrible and are effectively worthless. Like, I would not give you a million script for critical mass. And I would like to explain why, because these items are so bad. If they weren't jackpot drops, most people would just tell you to vendor them. And I can prove that too. So, this is a critical mass with T6 damage. No damage barrel, no damage mastery. That is important. It does 33,000 damage per hit. Okay, that's horrible, considering it has no synergy at all and no nano. So it's gaining 10% damage from no nano and 5% damage for being a jackpot. Well, if I just tab in game, this T4 mass cannon with no damage roll, so it's not getting 15% damage from a damage roll. It has the same no barrel, no synergy bonus, no nothing, no nano. It does 30,990, so we'll just round up and say 31,000. Critical mass only does 2k more damage per ball than this does, despite having a 15% damage increase from T6 damage and 5% from being a jackpot. Make it make sense. So, do you realize the implications of this? Let's compare to an actually good mass cannon like this one. This does 46,700 damage per hit. Well, per ball, I should say. Now, let's do some very simple math, and let's take away the damage barrel and damage mastery, because the critical mass doesn't have that. This does 36,965 damage per ball, approximately. Reminder, critical mass, a jackpot, does 33,000. This also has T5 damage, not T6, so it's gaining a total of 7% damage increase. Why does the non-jackpot just do more base damage than the jackpot version with the jackpot bonus? Make it make sense. And the worst part is when you start looking at the whole package, the synergy. This synergy is one of the worst in the entire game. You would not ever use this synergy. There is a single perk that gives 15% health, which gives you more survivability than this tier 1 does. So this can straight up be outsourced to a single ego perk if you wanted this. And mind you, that ego perk is considered trash by most of the high-end expo community. Nobody uses it. So this is literal useless. 10% damage is nice, but then you consider that most synergies that give you flat damage bonuses give you 15%. So that is, excuse me, that is a jackpot exclusive synergy that gives you less damage than the average damage value you would expect on a singular 4-piece non-backpack synergy. Then you get into the really bad part. Something like Ether Acceleration can give the whole team 25% damage. Quasar Wave gives you 25% damage. Cleansing Napalm gives you 15% damage and applies a debuff that raises your damage by 50%. So before we even add the synergy bonuses, regular mass cannons are already out DPSing critical mass. Just objectively, they are in the same ballpark or doing slightly more. Then you consider the actual synergy effects. Using this synergy means you can't use guard armament. It means you can't use assault armament. So that's already a giant problem. And even with this synergy, this 10% damage, this only goes up to like 37,000. That is still leagues below just having CN. 3-piece, not even the full 4-piece, just the 3-piece. And let's go back to this. This has a nano, which means it's doing minus 10% damage. This doesn't have a damage barrel or a mastery, and it has green damage. This is a work in progress weapon. So this is the worst this weapon's ever going to be. But it still does 29,000 per ball. If I just swapped this with this, the idea is to get T6 damage. So this is a great example weapon. If I just swap this to T5 damage, this damage value is basically neck and neck with critical mass. And you know how I know that? Because if we just took away the nano and added 10% damage to this, this would do 32,000 per ball. That's only 1,000 less than this. And then you consider the actual synergy effect and the fact it has a nano, which I know nanos are bugged on these weapons right now, but we're going to assume, to make this video a bit more timeless, that nanos work. Then this weapon just ignores 25% damage resistance and has a synergy that makes all 4 players deal 25% more damage and makes you shoot 25% faster. On top of the base damage being so incredibly close. Like, if it had T6 damage, by the way, if this had T6 damage instead of green damage, it would still get that 10% damage back, and it would be doing 32,000 base damage even with a nano. So, let me get this straight. Critical mass does about the same DPS as like a halfway completed nanoed. It's just like, you see what I'm getting here, right? Like, this weapon is horrible. If this, take your hand, cover up the word critical mass, and just look at this. If you dropped this exactly as is in the world, people would tell you it is not worth much at all. It's barely even worth script value. And I want to point out that these are all like this, by the way. Every single expo jackpot is like this. This is an impact shroud. Same unusable garbage synergy. This is a horrible shield bonus because, honestly, you really need to wean yourself off blowing yourself up, and everybody wants Survivor for obvious reasons. At least it's a Rhino base, so it's a good shield base, but, like, if you pick this shield up, if you picked up a Rhino shield that has basically no synergy, and take 40%, this is basically a T6 blast-proof Rhino with no synergy. People, if you posted that in the trading channel right now, people would say, maybe I give you 200k for this. But because it is a special name, there are certain people in the community that think this is worth anything. And by the way, every single item is like this. This is Flux Dome. This is a Hurricane base, which is one of the worst shield base types in the entire game. Always has the health booster perk, which literally nobody wants, and the same useless synergy. If this wasn't called Flux Dome, and this was, you just picked this item up as like a T5 Hurricane booster, IV whatever, people would tell you it's worth whatever the vendor will give you. And seemingly all of the jackpot items so far are like this. They are all unusable garbage, which by extension makes them worthless. Because why would you ever use critical mass when you can just use a weapon like this that hits 30% harder, has a synergy that increases its damage by 50%, gives you 30% extra less damage taken, or something like this, you shoot 25% faster than critical mass, you make 4 players do 25% more damage, or Quasar Wave, which can reach a higher base damage number than critical mass and give you 25% more on top of it from the synergy. Why would you ever willingly choose to use this item? And if an item is so not good compared to the less rare versions, why does being rare matter? The world's longest shit is really rare. In fact, out of 9 billion whatever humans over like 9 billion years or whatever, there's only ever going to be one of them. But you'd have a real hard time finding someone that would pay you a lot of money for it. And I view these the exact same way. Okay, that's basically everything I want to point out.